their bondage with us. We brought that old mindset with us. But I want you to know there is a Lord of breakthroughs. And God wants to break in, break that down so you can break forth. We see this time and time again in the Bible. We see it in the life of Abraham. Abraham was a man that God was going to call, and through him and through his seed, ultimately a nation would be born. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob would be renamed Israel, and then he would have 12 sons, and before you know it, there would be 12 tribes of Israel, and then there would be a nation that would emerge, and out of that nation there would come kings, and out of Judah would come a Messiah. And what God had in store, beginning with Abraham, he said, I'm going to bless you. When he first heard God's voice, he said, I'll bless you. I'll make your name great. You'll be a blessing. I'll bless all the families in the earth through you. What a fantastic plan that Abraham could have never dreamed that God had in store for him. But let me tell you about Abraham. Before he would ever see that happen, he needed a breakthrough. And his breakthrough was tied to his father. You see, his name was Abram, and they were living in the Ur of the Chaldees, Genesis chapter 11. And one day the father comes to the family. Abram's married to a woman by the name of Sarai, and he's got other children, and then maid servants and men servants, and he's got a whole family clan. Has a family meeting and says, we're not going to stay here anymore. Something came into the heart of the father to come to a place called Canaan. He said, so we're going to make our way there. Now, you know, to travel back then and to move involved a whole lot, because you folded up your tent, you brought your livestock, and it was going to be a lot of sacrifice. But it came into the father's heart to get to a destination. Bible doesn't say how long they traveled, but what the Bible does say is that they came to a place short of the intended destination. It was called Haran. And when they came to that place, the father said, you know what, let's camp out here. They began to camp out there, and I'm sure the place was very accommodating. They were able to live there. Maybe they'd be able to grow some crop there. And it was good for their livestock, and before you know it, they began to settle in Haran. Again, the Bible doesn't say how long they were there, but they were there for a good amount of time, so much so his father died there. Now, Haran was halfway, really, between where they were and where they were supposed to go. And it was the father that got them to that place. But now the father's dead. But you know what's interesting? What's interesting is even though dad died, they're still living in the place the father brought them to. So they're still living in the same place geographically that they got there because of dad. And so they're just living there. One day, Abram goes out, and the Bible said he was an idolatrous man. He probably went to worship the moon or something, and he had an encounter with the true and living God. And that's when God broke in. Someone say, God broke in. God broke in. Suddenly the voice of God breaks in on the scene, unsuspected to Abram, uninvited, wasn't looking for it, but the God of breakthroughs was about to show up. Breakthrough number one, God breaks in. He broke in, he said, I got a plan for you. And it had nothing to do with his natural connection. He said, but my plan doesn't involve you living where you are. He said, Abram, get up and get out. He said, separate yourself from your natural family. And then God said all the things that he would do. So God broke into his life. What's the thing that God began to break down? His family ties. He began to break down his natural identity in order for him to become a man that would move toward his destiny. But he had to ultimately break forth. He had to then break forth out of a land he had become familiar with. What land? The land his father brought him to. And you know, if God never broke in, and if that was never broken down, he would have died in the very land his father died.